Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. It's in the description below. Your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you find on any Watchbox platform. Reach out to me directly for pricing. Email tmosso@thewatchbox.com. New for 2020. Made in a limited series of 1,953 pieces in stainless steel, this is the Breitling Avi REF.765 1953 Re-Edition. The Co-Pilot, revived for 2020, one of 3 versions of this watch made with rose gold, platinum, and steel is real. Sports watch collectors, this is the one for you. Now, the timepiece is very true to history in terms of its size. It's fairly compact at 41.1 millimeters in diameter, 14.2 millimeters thick, and it is a manual wind, and 48.6 millimeters from lug tip to lug tip. This was Breitling's second pure re-edition of the last 3 years after the reference 806 1959 re-edition from the Navitimer line. If that's the pilot's watch, then this is the co-pilot's watch. A timepiece that has a 22 millimeter spacing between the lugs, so though 48.6 millimeters across the wrist, fairly short, it actually winds up with a fairly modern stance. That broad lug spacing giving it the look of a modern watch on the wrist and a more contemporary wrist presence, even as the details remain vintage evocative. Now, on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, you can see it wears well. I've got plenty of clearance on both sides. You can see down the barrel, plenty of clearance on each side from over the top, and then the cuff shot reveals that the watch with its sloped bezel and domed plexiglass crystal will probably slip underneath most dress cuffs and tight sleeves. Now, taking a look at the hardware and the software, as I like to say, Breitling straps are always a pleasant surprise. They never feel like mid-market luxury. They're always upscale, feeling as though they might be affixed to a Patek Philippe. So here we have a binding stitch, a contrasting stitch with a little bit of an ecru off-white dyeing. You have black calfskin that is sheer cut on the sides, showing the layers of construction, and then you can see the signal yellow on the bottom, and note that this calfskin on the bottom is completely fresh. This is a brand new Breitling factory strap right here. Now, the timepiece includes a simple no-nonsense pin buckle, so you can quickly adjust it, and the profile is well classical. Satin-finished mid-case with a relatively narrow mid-case profile that's characteristic of vintage watches. There's a small transitional bevel that expands on the ends of the lugs. The ends of the lugs squared off but relatively small, and then the lug hoods are polished. You'll note that the bezel is beaded, and if you look very carefully, you can see that this is still a captive bezel. Breitling bezels, in general, are held on using screws, a system that makes them more durable and less likely to be detached by impact. So though this is a relatively thin and spare, historically inspired bezel, it still has that captive construction that makes it tough. The bezel is all of high polish with lacquered infills for the numerals, and it is actually a 12-click bezel that is bidirectional and aviator-style bezel, calibrated up to, well, triangle, but between 1 and 12. Now, it can be used against either of the hands. You just got to keep in mind what you're timing if you try to use it with the minutes, because there is no minute scale calibration. So think of 3, for example, as 15, and 6, for example, as 30. Now, the dial is all matte black. We'll get to it in a moment. We'll talk about the controls first. Vintage style, broad and flat Breitling crown with polished pump style pushers, and the crystal, of course, plexiglass, so you get that lovely off-axis distortion that you get with a true vintage watch. We have ecru lume here, as with the 806 1959 re-edition, a little bit of fauxtina going on. The watch features the modern Breitling logo with no B, but also a vintage Breitling font used to brand the style. Note that all of the scales, constant seconds, chronograph minutes, chronograph hours, they are all radially arrayed, and the minute scale actually goes up to 15 rather than a conventional 30. Now, there are concentric patterns that are embossed onto each of those subregisters, and each one of them is countersunk. You'll note that the font used for the Arabic numerals for minutes and seconds is vintage and broad, and most of the printing on the dial is white on black. Now, you can see that the watch is one of 1,953 made. It is a certified chronometer. It does have a solid case back. It is 30 meters water resistant, 765 AVI, and what powers it? Well, the B09. Caliber B09 is basically the B01, but without a date and manual wind. So this is an in-house chronometer certified manual wind caliber B09 with a 70-hour power reserve, a stop seconds or hacking function, 5-position adjustment, and the chronometer certificate pivots on 47 joules, and it has a super crisp column wheel action. The column wheel here is as good as any you'll find from Rolex or Zenith, which I consider to be the industry standards for luxury class column wheel chronograph feel. Now, it's also a vertical clutch, which means the seconds hand will not jump when you start it. Moreover, if you just like to run your chronograph full time to have seconds, minutes, and hours at center, you can absolutely just leave it running without additional wear, tear, or hazard to the watch. That's the other advantage to a vertical clutch. If you love this watch, and it's hard not to, reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details. And we're back with the 765 AVI Copilot Re-Edition by night.